In this episode of the Documentary Review Podcast, Jonathan and I live our dreams of becoming official auditors as we discuss the 2015 film Going Clear: Scientology and the Prism of Belief. Welcome to the podcast. I am PT.
And I'm Jonathan. Glad you can join us.
Yes, indeed. Jonathan, all right, first of all, I've been trying to think of how to phrase this part. We need to do some sort of legal disclaimer to avoid getting sued by the Church of Scientology before we begin this episode.
Or beat up. You don't know.
Yeah, right. The views expressed on this podcast are for entertainment purposes only, do not represent any, even there might not even be our real views. You don't know.
You don't know. Yeah.
We're just having fun. We have no idea what's going on. So my first question, Jonathan, before we get to the synopsis and before we get to whether you liked it or not, you up for some Scientology? You gonna join? You gonna join after this?
Oh, am I in? Oh yeah, absolutely. I was like
Nice.
halfway through and was like, man, where's the sign-up office? I'm in. Let's get some Scientology going here. I'm
Nice.
game.
Sorry for all my scooting around. I realized my computer was about to die and was unplugged, but we're plugged now. All right, so
Awesome.
so we're both...
You are you joining the church? You in? It is an official religion now, according to the IRS.
You know, as a writer, like it is like I'm not gonna lie, it's minorly tempting to be like they didn't cover too much in this documentary, just a little bit, but there is like a whole thing among like Hollywood that like, man, if you join Scientology, you get a big boost to your career. So, there's this little that's always in the back of my mind. But no, I'm not gonna join. No, I'm not
Oh
joining.
yeah, no. All right, just checking.
But if I did join,
Right.
it would be for professional purposes only.
When you started, it would be for professional purposes only.
True. Good point.
Later on, you'd be, cleaning latrines with your tongue.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm not joining. So what'd you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down?
Yeah, I'm gonna go thumbs up. And the first half of this documentary I loved, and the second half, because this is kind of I guess we'll get into it in a second, like a two-part piece or feature, and that I wasn't so fond of. I mean, it was okay, but the first half I was really intrigued by and really, really entertained by.
Interesting. I would almost go the other way, so I'm interested to get into it. But I liked it too. Yeah. So before we get into that, although you want to give us your patented Jonathan synopsis?
Sure. So Going Clear is a documentary film about the religion of Scientology. The first half of the film basically gives the backstory of how Scientology came into being, kind of follows around the life and times of its creator, L. R. Hubbard, and the second half kind of dives in a lot heavier, is kind of told from the point of view of ex-church members, and dives into the problems and abuses of the church, against its own members. So that's kind of Going Clear in a nutshell.
Cool. Good synopsis. Yeah, we obviously this. Well, before I say that, let me say that this is, man. I'm. Let me just say also that I'm least prepared for this episode because let's just say my HBO membership was expired before I was able to rewatch this. I watched it a couple weeks ago, so but I didn't watch it like with my notepad taking notes. So this is based on a book, Going Clear, by a guy, Lawrence. I'm so sorry, Lawrence. I forgot your last name. It's based on a book, Going Clear. I could probably look it up in a second on my phone, but that guy put in a lot of research into this, and like a lot of the stuff that's revealed in this book and in the documentary is stuff that really wasn't documented, at least before, in like one good place. So a lot of the stuff that's revealed in this is kind of revelations and new stuff that wasn't like necessarily publicly known about Scientology. At least that's my understanding. And the guy put a lot of years into researching this, and it was really quite the project, to get people to talk. Because as we'll talk about, people are I have a lot of like reason not to talk about the Church of Scientology. There's a lot of good reasons not to participate in this kind of thing. It was a lot of work that went into it by the author, who is one of the people who's interviewed in this. But there's also
Right.
all kinds of other people like I was surprised to see Paul Haggis was one of the people because he is a writer and director in Hollywood. Um, he directed and wrote Traffic, which Oscar-winning movie. He wrote a couple of the more recent James Bond films. So that what is it, Quantum of Solace? He wrote that, and he wrote Casino Royale, the more recent one. So he's like a big time writer and director in Hollywood, and yeah. So I mean, he's probably like their most high profile guy. But I remember like a few years ago when I was like more trying to get into screenwriting stuff that his name was always like thrown around as like the big Scientology guy. Like, oh, if you join up with the Church of Scientology, Paul Haggis could help you. And like I was joking at the beginning about that, but there is like a little bit of undercurrent to that in some
Oh
Hollywood
yeah,
things. Like
yeah. After watching the documentary, I can totally see where the church holds a lot of sway and a lot of power, and can influence, and help someone's career.
absolutely,
But yeah, they need a new spokesperson because Tom Cruise has kind of run his course as
yeah,
as their spokesperson.
yeah, I think
But
so too. That was like totally jumping out of order, but that was like I would say genuinely kind of chilling. Like the parts where like Tom Cruise was like talking in front of the big like gathering of Scientology people, and he's like, let's hear it for good old LR, and like was saluting. Like that was to me that was like that whole part was kind of creepy. It was like weird, and I don't
yeah,
know.
it was super creepy. But I had seen that actually before on YouTube. I remember when like that conference came out, like somebody was like, "Check this out," and you saw Tom Cruise doing his little speech at the
Right.
Scientology thing. And you're like, "Oh!" And that was right before his like little sweater speech. I don't know if you remember that rant on YouTube. Again, he was going off on Scientology. He really looks like a crazy person in there. But you know what? I of course, just like everybody else, is kind of a hater on Tom Cruise, and now we're really jumping out of order. Um, but it made me feel for him. It really did. Like when I was watching this, like, oh, you know what? Because I hope Tom Cruise watches this documentary or has watched it, because it is mind blowing. Like essentially, he was part of the church, and then he was kind of gotten out of it, and they literally like put together a plan and strategy to suck him back in, and it worked. And there was private investigators involved in an entire like scheme and plan to suck him back in, so he would become their more or less spokesperson and do a lot of good for the church overall. But if I was Tom Cruise watching that, I'd be like, oh my God, they essentially like worked hard to break him and Nicole Kidman up and to do like all kinds of like really seedy, underhanded things just to make him come back to the fold. I mean, I would hope that's revolutionary to him if he actually ever sees this thing.
Yeah, like I get what you're saying that if you were Tom Cruise and you watched it, you would feel that way. But I don't, like I don't want to say anyone's too far gone to or whatever. But I think he's pretty indoctrinated. I don't know if
Right. Well, I think so too, and I think like again, that's where like all the people like telling their stories. Most of them had, I think the shortest any of them had been a member of the church was like 17 years. Most of the people who had gotten out and kind of were telling their stories as part of this documentary. But they looked back, and that was one of my notes right from the get go, is that it's amazing once you're out how clear everything kind of becomes and how quickly it becomes so. So all the people that were out weren't like, oh yeah, it was a really good experience overall, but I left the church for whatever reason, and it totally makes sense, and anyone could join it and get a good thing out of it. No one was even remotely like that. They were like, I feel like an idiot, like, oh my God, I mean, like I dedicated 17 years of my life to that, and now that I'm out and I'm sitting here looking around and part of the real world again, I'm just like, how, I feel like a fool even looking back on it, and that
right.
was universal.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I think that that's a little play on the title. I think the title is a little bit of a play on words in that, and the going clear is the kind of the goal of Scientology is that's like the highest status is clear, but for these people that they interview who are out of it, it's like they're finally can see crystal clear what they've been through, and it's like, oh my God.
Right.
Um,
Right. So I'm going to bring us back around to the beginning. We'll hit up Tom Cruise again later, I would imagine.
yep.
But since I did watch it actually even today and do have notes, so it starts off like I said, kind of. So a couple quick interviews. You kind of set the tone for these are all people that are out of the church, kind of telling their thing. But then it jumps into the background of Scientology, which is something I knew virtually nothing of prior to the documentary.
All
And
right.
I thought that part was fascinating because one, like I think Scientology and a lot of other religions have very similar aspects to them. Different religions throughout time and current religions. Um, but it was really cool because this is obviously one of the most modern, popular, larger scale religions. And so we actually have a background on the founder, which is pretty rare. Um, and so, kind of goes back through Hubbard, L.R. Hubbard, who starts off writing pulp fiction. Uh, and so he's a sci-fi writer. He's a novelist. And he does actually okay at it. He's decent at it. And kind of goes through right off the bat, though. Right after that, he enlists in the Navy for the war. And this is the part where all of a sudden everybody's red flag should have been going up. Because they put him in charge of a boat, and he's sailing around, and he's like the captain or whatever. I don't know that much about naval stuff or whatever. So he's a naval officer. He's in charge of a boat. He shoots his cannons at like a log that's floating, and then reports that he sank a German sub or Korean sub. I guess it would have been the Korean War, and then he drops off all his depth charges while he's going through the canal at magnetic rocks or whatever, and then eventually he shells a Mexican village that's obviously not Korea. That's so we're not like it was close or there could have been confusion there. I mean, this is obviously somebody with a wildly overactive imagination who's borderline insane. I mean, those aren't and the cool thing is again, I'm sure that's part of this guy doing his research. He's they had a 900-page file on this guy from the military for obvious reasons, because all of a sudden he's like, oh my gosh, this guy's a war hero. We sunk a bunch of ships, and then they're like, wait, no, he just fired randomly at logs. That's got to create some paperwork.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. 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 I don't even know. I don't even know where to begin with Elrod. I'm. I. One thing I think they maybe didn't do a super good job of in this documentary is that I would like to know more about is his whole sci-fi writing, because I'm pretty sure he was writing novels up through the 80s and stuff like that, and maybe they mentioned that, but I don't recall them really talking about. I think he just kept going with his novel writing throughout his life. But yeah, to me the most interesting thing about this whole part is you there?
Yeah.
All right. To me, the most interesting thing about this whole part, and my question to you is, how much of the Scientology thing is Ron L. Hubbard or L. Ron Hubbard being sincere, and how much of it is him being like, "Mwahaha, I'm going to scam everybody"?
Ooh, I think that's the beauty of it, and that's part of what made it so interesting for me. Is I think that line is blurred to death. So I think that he did believe. I think he made himself believe. I think when he started off, so that he really thought he was doing something good, and then I think as he went on, he was like, man, I could, and it's really hard, I think, for either one of us and for most people out there to understand a mind like this, because you can't just be like, oh, I'm a famous writer, and then just go to your next cocktail party and be like, yeah, I'm a famous writer. I've written 13 books, and I have 2 Emmys, or not 2 Emmys, 2 whatever, 2 Pulitzer Prize, whatever. Anyway,
Right.
and just start telling stories, and then there is a very, very small portion of people that they can start to tell that story and then believe their own story eventually.
Right.
Where essentially they bought their own tale, and he was certainly that kind of a guy. Where he would, after he went through the war, he was he would tell stories about how he was injured in the war and, broke his back, whatever, all these crazy stories. They're just totally fabricated. And even those stories, I think he believed over time. I think that's kind of how his mind worked. And when he did I think he probably went into Scientology because first he wrote Dianetics, which was a very popular book in the 70s. And and he made some money off of it, and then lost that money as well. But and I think he really thought that was a great idea. Like he had a great idea, and maybe it was kind of a good idea. You know, like the premise behind the book and the philosophy of it was kind of that you could go back through and find painful memories or remember kind of give problems and then go back through and kind of relive those. And I mean, whatever. That's kind of a, I don't know. I mean, you could do clinical trials on that. I mean, maybe there's something there, maybe there's not. But whatever. At least it seemed like a decent theory. And you know, so I think he was kind of thought he had a great idea there. I don't think that was a scam. I think maybe when he started Scientology, he was like, you know what, I can turn this into a religion and really make some money off of it. But then I think he started to believe his own story. And I think at the end, when he, you know, by the time of his death and, you know, years prior to that, he really believed his own story, that he was some kind of a mystic. And, you know, he talked about how he had all these prior lives that he could remember in the Mediterranean, and he was searching for his own treasure. I mean, things like that aren't just like, wah ha ha, I'm scamming everybody. That's batshit crazy. And you know, he got there.
Yeah, no,
So I mean,
yeah, I definitely agree, and I think that's insightful. And I think it's one of my beliefs I've been thinking about lately a lot is that I think one of the underrated driving forces in all of our lives is the idea of cognitive dissonance. Like you know, there's been research that when we hold two ideas that are like contradictory in our mind, both is true, it like activates the same part of your brain as like pain. It's like you activate your pain centers. So I mean, that's the same reason that like someone who is, you know, really a pothead would get into the idea of legalizing marijuana and be like, you know what, this is right. This is like people need this, and people who it's the whole thing that when you are doing one thing and you believe another thing is right in your mind, but you also believe that you're a good person, because basically everyone believes they're a good person, right? You gotta reconcile that somehow, and I think that L. Ron Hubbard definitely was trying to scam people, at least from what this documentary presents. I think at the beginning he was trying to scam people, because there's even that quote that he was like, "Yeah, the only way to make real money is to start a religion or whatever." Um,
right.
but but I think that whole thing of cognitive dissonance, when we do something that we know is wrong, a lot of times um, we can trick ourselves into believing it's right through. And obviously his is a much more extreme case than like the stuff that I do every day. That I'm sure I have lots of things that I justify through cognitive dissonance as well, but his is obviously a much more extreme case of that. But yeah, just that was the most interesting thing of that whole part. I did get a little bit. Some parts of that I was getting a little bored when he was like doing this whole, you know, sailing around and all that stuff. But like the whole basic concept of this guy who starts a religion for profit and eventually like comes in to believe his own stuff was very very fascinating. And I like your thought too on like this, that we don't have a we haven't seen the birth of religion quite like so closely as this before. So very interesting.
Yeah. Again, it reminded me very much. Sorry, anybody that, you know, I'm just going to throw out this disclaimer. I'm sure during the course of this podcast offend everyone that has any kind of religious beliefs or values. So sorry. So this kind of reminded me a lot too, and I wish there was more. Even more documentation on the birth of the Mormon religion, because a lot of this, like a lot of the beginnings, like if you ever like go back through and try and, you know, kind of follow Joseph Smith and his origins and things like that, where he started off as a I'm not a soothsayer, but basically would use seeing stones to help people find treasure, essentially, which that's a con. I mean, that's a short game con. I mean, that's what that is. And he started off kind of in the same way where Hubbard started off, and he was, you know, maybe not such a malicious con artist to start off with, but to say, like, to make up his war stories and to like live in his own fictional world, and things like that. I would love to see like the parallels, or I'd love to see at least see more details on the birth of that religion. So those are really the only two major religions that have happened where we have lots of photographs and documents and things like that. So, but anyway, that's cool. There were some stories like when his one ex-wife, his first wife, Sarah, she had all these quotes and like things from like her apparent memoirs or whatever. I assume she's dead. They never really like. Maybe I should read the book, but they didn't give a whole lot of background on like where are these quotes coming from. Because like they had a crazy part where he steals their baby and drops them off in a Cuban
That was crazy.
orphanage. That was insane. I was like, this is the craziest person ever. I mean, he was a nut job. Anyway, and that was even after he had written Dianetics and made some money and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
and
even
even
at that point.
yeah, and even before that, there's the part that I was like, one of the parts I was surprised by, I should say, is when he joined like the like satanic cult or whatever.
Yeah, they never
like,
said it was satanic, but it was some weirdo satanic issue. Well, I guess it was
yeah,
satanic. They were trying to birth the Antichrist. So.
Right, and I'm pretty sure like because I've read about that cult before, because I'm a big fan of the writer Ira Levin and the book and movie Rosemary's Baby, and I'm pretty sure that's the cult that movie.
Right. That's yeah, absolutely is.
Like, oh, I didn't know L. Ron Hubbard was into that. All right, cool.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of Dianetics, do you remember seeing Dianetics commercials when you were little?
Yeah,
like,
totally do. Totally.
Like, yeah, totally. I remember like even asking my mom, like, oh, we should probably get that, because I remember the commercial was like very like, do you want to control your destiny and all this stuff, and I'm sure if you were like kid in the 80s like us, you probably remember it, but
yeah,
my mom being like, oh no, we're not we're not getting that.
Little did we know, we could have been little cult members, dude.
Yeah, I know. We missed out. Yeah, so any other what else from L. Ron Hubbard's life?
Oh, here's in case you're thinking about anybody out there starting cult/religion. This was one of L. Ron's big mistakes. Was he threw out measurable claims. If you're ever going to start a cult or religion, don't like most of the stuff wasn't measurable, but he left a couple things out there, like if you go clear, do his program, your IQ will raise, universally, and ailments will be cured, things like that. You can't throw that stuff out there, because as soon as you can prove it, it's pretty much going to shoot down your religion. So don't. That's I think one of the main reasons, one of the reasons Scientology probably isn't like taken off like wildfire. In fact, I think at one point they mentioned I think it's even in the 2000s, in this that the active membership was only like 50,000 people, which I was like, oh, that's pretty darn dinky religion.
Yeah, it's a super interesting point, and like totally. Not in relation to this. I just happened to read this book called The Psychopath Test, which was a nonfiction book about this guy who's basically the premise of the book is he's trying to figure out how does psychology determine what a psychopath is, and B, what do we do with psychopaths? Because the whole idea is that if someone's a psychopath, basically they can't be cured from that. So like, do we just lock them up forever? What do we do? So anyway. All that aside, this author is pretty well-known guy, and when it came out that he was working on this project, he was contacted by a bunch of Scientology people who were like, yes, we have the scientific answers to your problems, and we can the great thing about our religion is it's totally scientifically provable, and like we can scientifically help you, and the psychiatrists, psychologists are all a bunch of crackpots, and you got to pay attention to us if you want to have your book have any meaning. So that's like a whole big chapter in his book is like him going and like investigating their claims and like seeing what's up with them, but they totally like support his book because they know he's gonna uncover some possibly slightly not great things about psychiatry, so they're all about it, and they try to convert him to Scientology throughout the book. It's kind of funny, but good book. I recommend The Psychopath Test.
Okay.
So where I was going with all that, I guess, is that it's interesting what you say about that's his mistake, that it can be scientifically verified that it's not true, which I agree with, but at the same time, it seems that like the members are. Like when you have people and you're like, well, we did a scientific study that proved that it is true. Like scientific studies at the end of the day come down to who you believe. You know what I mean? Like
Right. I mean, I agree and I disagree. So like, yes, you're gonna have the core members that are just like there are people that will believe what they're going to believe because of their religion because they have true faith and that faith is unshakable, it's certain. So if somebody tells you, hey, like for example, like I worked with a guy that took the Book of Mormon in a very literal fashion, and part of it was like 1,000 years ago there was this giant civilization that lived approximately where New York City was, like, and they had this massive war that killed millions of people or whatever. And sorry if I'm getting some of the details wrong. Anybody can email us and yell at me, but that's the gist of it. And I was like, well, yeah, there was no super giant, like somewhat advanced civilization where New York is. We would have uncovered it, with archaeological evidence by this point. I mean, we dig pretty deep in New York. And he's like, oh yeah, no, they totally have found tons of stuff that absolutely
Right.
supports that. I was like, oh, well, they covered that up very well. I mean, I don't know how to dispute that. I mean, that's just like, oh yeah, and like, I mean, it's same thing with Christianity. I mean, I don't want to pick on one religion, I'll pick on them all, but like, I mean, like you can say the Earth is 6,000 years old, and 4,000 years ago there was only 8 people on Earth. According to the Book of Noah, everybody gets off the ark. There's only 8 people left on planet Earth. 4,000 years ago, there's a pretty massive amount of evidence saying there's other civilizations and cultures on a global scale, much more than 8 people. 4,000 years ago, we're talking 2000 BC. The Romans had an empire back then, or the Greeks did anyway. And so I mean, but you're right. People just like brush that off. They're like, oh nope, that's
Yeah,
not
I mean
because
that's my problem with all scientific studies and totally
that's no.
non-religious note. Yeah, that's totally my problem with all scientific studies on a non-religious note. It's like, gosh, I hate it when you have conflicting scientific studies because, who knows? Like like I read something recently that someone did like a meta study, and it was like they put together a study that all like basic food items are both good and bad for you. Like they showed studies that proved proved like the exact opposite in every case. So I mean, like on a obviously much less extreme scale, again, we all face that every day of being like, which scientific study do we believe? But yeah, obviously it's much more extreme in the case of this.
Right, right. So, all right, I'll pull us back from that tangent but yeah, yeah, I think we could spend an hour on that.
Mhm.
Because especially with the food thing, because we did a fitness podcast at one
Right.
time, and that was eventually I just got so frustrated because literally I would do things that would read a study that said being vegan is absolutely the healthiest thing you can do. Eating meats is horrible for you and your body, and then I would find a study that was done the exact same time period that's like, yeah, you absolutely need red meats to give you the proteins you need, and not having it will cause a shorter life. So yeah, just who
Right.
knows what to believe. Apparently, it's just all Scientology. So,
Yes, indeed.
so anyway, we'll get through the L.R. Hubbard L. Ron there. He goes through that, like you said, that part you were bored at with the Sea Org, where basically like through tax evasion charges has to leave the country, and he just sails around on a couple ships. And again, this is just the psychology of this. Like I would love to take courses on this. I mean, just that there are these people that just dedicate their lives to him. They just sail around on these ships and do whatever he tells them to. He's like, do these crappy manual labor tasks, scrub every inch of rust off of the ship for the next 3 weeks, and everybody's like, yes, sir. And they just do it. And then he looks up in the sky and he's like, that's planet Xandu, and there's all these people that live on there, and everybody looks at him and they're like, holy cow, that's amazing, you know that. It's like, wow. Whereas, and these aren't people that are idiots. I mean, like later on, they're out of it, like I said, and they're just looking back and they're like, yeah, wow, that's really odd how I was just like did anything that guy said, and they're obviously like intelligent people. They, like not and make good decisions since they left Scientology. So it's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, to me that's like the most interesting thing about Scientology is the whole thing that like it really seems like at least a religion that caters to rich, and not even rich, but like semi middle to upper class people that are intelligent and successful in their careers, but also makes these crazy claims. But so whatever you want to say about L. Ron Hubbard, apparently put together a system that's really good at getting people to buy into these like smart people. I I guess that's one thing that I want to be careful about is I don't want to discount these people because like in a way like I'm like God, how can you believe that stuff? But another way, I mean these I don't know, these are smart people that are I don't know kind of the
Right.
victims
Well,
of this, and I don't. It's a really complicated issue, I guess.
it is, but you know what? I kind of got an insight again watching this on how, especially that, like you said, that class of people that they kind of go after, like a relatively affluent class of, a lot of times educated people. But I think I get it. So, these are people that have a comfort level in life that they can start to focus on non-issue issues. And by that I mean like an issue in life is I'm starving to death. That's an issue. You whatever else you've got, your political beliefs and things like that, they definitely take a really distant backseat to need food and shelter.
Right.
The way the stepping stone into his religion is, are you ill at ease? Do you want some kind of peace in your life? Do you want to think clearer? Do you want to, expand your horizons and be the best you can be? That's kind of that's like how they get you in the door. They get people in under that premise. They're like, well, take it or leave it. It's not it's not for everybody. But if you want to come in and check it out and it works for you, then it works for you, and then great, join our thing. And that's kind of their premise for getting you in the door. And that is something for people who have no problems in their basic needs in life. And so then, but once you meet all your basic needs, then all of a sudden you start to think, am I a good person? Am I happy? How do I obtain happiness? How do I become a better person? All that stuff. And they're right there for you. That's what their thing is. Plus they operate out of California where people are missing that stuff. Take that, California.
Bam, California. So yeah, man, we're going pretty long on this. So let me talk about one interesting thing about Scientology that it kind of starts to get into in the second half, which is the whole idea of auditing, and that so basically you're supposed to go in and there's this machine that L. Ron Hubbard invented that you hold these diodes and they're these metal things, and you talk about your memories and based on these little readings that an auditor, one of the church devotees reads, you have to kind of relive those memories, talk about those memories in more detail, and eventually you're supposed to purge those memories. What obviously a side effect of that is that they have your deepest and darkest secrets and they keep them on file apparently. So that's a pretty big focus of the second half of the documentary. And oh my God, what like a betrayal of trust! Holy cow!
Oh my God, yeah, I thought of that too, and like I thought poor John Travolta, because like obviously like they do bring him into the documentary, but like and not just John Travolta, but especially him because he might want to leave the church, and I'm sure if you're Joe Nobody and you leave the church and you have all these secrets, who really cares? You know what I mean? If you're gonna go back and be a garbage man somewhere, and your friends find out that you have some weird sexual fantasies, or your mother, you had some weird things in your past that you were ashamed of, or it's not going to ruin your life. And there's only like they'd have to like literally track down your friends to tell them for anybody to care. But like John Travolta or anyone who has a public personality, they can't let that stuff get out. They could ruin their careers and their lives, and that's obviously they identify themselves as these celebrities. So yes, they hold a tremendous amount of power over those people.
Absolutely, and even for the normal people whose family are in the church, they have pretty big hammer over those people too, because they basically convince your family that you're someone not to be trusted and not to have any contact with you. So that's a pretty good reason not to leave the church too, right? Even if you're not a celebrity.
Sure, and again like Scientology is so easy to pick on. But like I have a friend that's Jehovah's. Well, he's not anymore, but he was born and raised Jehovah's Witness, and their church did the exact same kind of thing. And actually, it was during a Sunday service where he had been getting into a little trouble as a teen, nothing crazy, but the church elders brought him in and they had like a little sit down with them. And one of the questions they asked was like, "Do you really do you feel you have a personal relationship with God?" And he thought about it for a minute, and he's only like I think 16 at the time. And he's like, well, no, not really. He said, I mean, I say the prayers and I've been going to church my whole life, but honestly, I was like, it's just one of those things where it just like became routine and never really thought about it. And, I guess I don't have a personal relationship with God. That was his answer. And they're like, okay. So that next Sunday, they were like, he is excommunicated. Like during the Sunday service, they're like, this guy is excommunicated from the church and no one ever have any contact with him again.
Wow.
And I mean, that's just another. I mean, like sign, yeah, and that included his parents and everybody, and and literally just like stood up and walked out of the church and like didn't know what to do. He was 16 and was off on his own after that. But I mean, there's just again, it's easy to pick on Scientology, but they do that exact same thing, and obviously that's tremendously powerful, especially and for parents alike. If you're a parent and you're going to get kicked out of the church, there's a good chance your children will stay and you'll never see them again.
So, one really interesting thing is, so today I looked up. I was just curious about Scientology, the Church of Scientology's response to this movie, and they've had like a million different things. They put together a whole website and stuff. But one of the interesting things I thought was they wrote a letter to the Hollywood Reporter that was in response to this movie, and they're like, we've carefully dissected this movie, and we found that there's a major error at least every 2 minutes throughout this movie, and to prove how untrue this movie is, here's the deepest, darkest secrets of all the people who spoke in the movie. And so they that was like part of their letters. They were like trying to discredit all the people who like talked in the movie. And I was like, dude, that is not discrediting. that is not.
Yeah, that absolutely proves the whole point.
Exactly. I was like, oh my god, you guys are idiots. This is like,
you just validated the movie.
This is like exactly it. And their other big point, like it was the worst like response I've ever heard. I guess what are you going to say? Because it's a pretty good movie that decimates their belief. But one of their big things was they're like, yeah, the guy who wrote the book Going Clear, it was all because L. Rudd Hubbard was such a successful science fiction author, and this guy was super jealous of his like science fiction success. That's why this guy dedicated years of his life to doing this, was just because he didn't have the success L. Ron Hubbard had. So I was like, oh my god, this is the worst response I've ever read.
Wow, that's a stretch and a half.
Yeah. So it should be said that their other complaint was that the filmmakers didn't reach out to the church as a whole to get a response. Now the filmmaker, like the Hollywood Reporter, obviously asked the filmmaker, did you do that or not, to validate it, and he said, well, technically I didn't like reach out to the church, but I reached out to like tons of people within the church, including what's his face, the leader of the church, David, whatever.
I got it. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And he didn't get back to me. He reached out to basically every celebrity that Tom Cruise, John Travolta, all those people everyone who's mentioned, he reached out to see if they wanted to state their side of it, and they all did not want to participate.
Right. Yeah. Excuse me, Savage, I think is Savage, David, yeah, something like that is his name. But anyway, yeah. So that was a big part of phase 2, and I wish I would have known how much like abuse went on in the church prior to. So in '86, L. Ron dies, and that other guy, David Savage, takes over, and it seems like he lost it. I mean, like he really, and I mean, like, again, to be fair to the religion, I don't know. I mean, maybe a lot of people are like, obviously there's huge abuses in the church, but there's huge abuses in the Catholic Church too. You know what I mean? If you go to the Vatican, it's like political and weird and nasty, and there's all kinds of sexual scandals and things that are horrible in the church, and obviously then like the pedophilia amongst the priests. So, I mean, like every religion has its pretty horrific sides to it, but that doesn't mean people showing up for Sunday Mass are bad people, or have a bad thought. You know what I mean? Or don't gain something from showing up at that Mass or service or whatever. It's just like they never really covered on, and I was curious about this, and maybe there aren't any. Are there like the, like holiday Christians? People that show up for church on Easter and Sunday, and the rest of the year they're like, yay, God loves me, and I'll go to heaven when I die, and that brings me peace. So yay. Are there Scientologists like that? Are there Scientologists walking around that, I don't know if they have weekly meetings or what, if they have a Mass or what they do, but are there people out there that show up once a week and don't go like crazy, radical into it, and they're just like, well, yeah, Scientology is really great. I feel great. I do my audit, not knowing that they're keeping a detailed file on me that they can screw me with later, but it sure makes me feel good once a week when I go through it. So I would love to have seen if those people exist, or if that's even part of it, their thing at all. But anyway, when that guy takes over the church, that's when they really start to focus on like the paranoia of the church and how hard they go after anyone that criticizes them, and how much they try and control and abuse the members of the church, where it's really like cultish, where if you're kind of thinking about quitting, they work you for 30 hours consecutively and let you sleep for 3 hours and then work you more and feed you scraps, and it's just like horrific conditions, and yet people can walk out anytime they want. I guess
Right.
that's what mind control or a cult is or whatever, but on the flip side of it is, how do you fight for the rights of people that don't want their rights fought for? Like, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, I'm confused by it. Like, yeah, it seems like, yeah, let's get all those people out of there. It's horrific. But on the other hand, when they're there, they're like, this is what I want to do. And they're grown-ups. And I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah. At that point, I don't know that you can do much for him. I mean, the part that disturbed me that that I was like, boy, somebody should do something about this, was the part where they were talking about like the nursery and stuff, and like the little kids who are like kept in horrific conditions while their parents are being like conditioned or brainwashed or whatever. Like, yeah, it was like, man, if this is true, some government agency should definitely be busting down the door, helping those
Right.
kids.
Right.
Like,
And then it's so hard to tell what's true and what's not. Like, I mean, there are a lot of stories with that, because I mean, like, you're referring to the one person that was like, uh, uh, what's his face? Not Tom Cruise, but John Travolta's handler, if you will, or
yeah,
whatever, through his liaison to the church, and she gets into their little camp to like get back into the fold because she had said something against the church. They take her daughter and they put her in this horrific, like, she was like, yeah, her daughter had like flies on her and her eyes were like glued shut by, sleet and just whatever mucus in her eyes, and it's like, oh my god, yeah, of course, if that's true, yeah, they should be busting down the door and saving those children. Um,
yeah.
but
And I don't know if like as a society we like. I mean, I feel bad for the people kind of who are brainwashed by Scientology, and but like I don't know really what is a society we owe to them or what we can do for them. I mean,
right, because I mean, that's a gray area. That, how do you make the determination of this person is brainwashed or this person believes that, and it's their right to believe it? I mean,
right?
I have no idea how to make that distinction.
Yeah,
I mean, I live out in Colorado, and I mean, pot's legal out here. I believe pot should be legal. Does that mean somebody from the deep south that thinks pot is like the worst drug on planet Earth should come and like save me from Colorado and like show me the way that pot's horrible? I mean, where do you draw that line?
by the way, my experience in the Deep South is that people in the Deep South do not think pot is the worst drug ever. People in
Well,
the Deep
okay,
South are way more in favor of it than people in Wisconsin today.
really? All
Uh,
right. Well, I'm just trying to offend every religion and every part of the country during
right.
this. So,
No problem. Um, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and then like we don't have to go into all the weird stories, but there's tons of stuff. There's like apparently John Travolta at one point wanted to leave, and they like threatened to basically reveal his public, his auditing file, make it public, and at one point, like you alluded to earlier, Tom Cruise was drifting away from the church, and they put in a huge plan to split him from Nicole Kidman. Tons of crazy stuff.
yeah. Oh, the one thing that is definitely a fact that blew my mind. So the whole L. Ron Hubbard wanted his Scientology to be considered a religion by the government, so that would be tax exempt. And he made that case, and they rejected it. They said, no, some people are profiting from the church, namely you, so it can't be a tax exempt religion. Well, then the IRS had essentially not back taxes just against L. Ron Hubbard, but against the entire church to the tune of $1 billion, and this in like the late 80s, where it literally would have shut down the church. They didn't have that much money at the time. And basically Scientology intimidated the IRS and won. I was like, what? Who can do that? Who can take? I mean, like,
I know, man. They're really good at paperwork. Jeez. Like,
yeah. So they filed like 2,400 lawsuits, not just against the IRS, but then against specific agents, and they were doing all and then they started like a smear campaign against the IRS, and they went after the IRS and won. And the IRS backed down. They were like, okay, what do we need to do to end this? And they were like, give us our, you give us our religious status, and we'll back off. So they forgave $1 billion tax debt, and they gave them religious status, and they won. They beat the IRS, like beat them down, not just like won a case, beat them down.
right.
So I thought that was pretty mind blowing.
That was is like, man, that's and that's like a scary win for Scientology because like they are definitely known for being super litigious and man, if they could beat the IRS, I don't I don't want to go up against them.
Right. I know we're in trouble doing this podcast, honestly.
Yeah.
We both compete.
Absolutely.
So, on that note, I suggest anyone listening to that join Scientology because it's awesome. That's my official position.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yes. So one I do want to throw out there that I think you can, like a little bit in opposition to what you've said a little bit. I think you can definitely differentiate Scientology from other religions in a couple of ways. And one is the whole idea that like basically you have to pay money to level up kind of in Scientology, which I've been a member of Christian churches all my life. And if you want to go to like Bible study or whatever, they're like, oh my God, we're super glad to have you. Please come to Bible study. Like you want to come to 5 Bible studies a week? Great. We would love to have you. We're dying to get people to these Bible studies. It's awesome. Whereas in Scientology, you gotta fork over the dough if you want to move up to the next level. And then there's also the whole thing that that is such just a complicated thing. Like for example, I am writing a book right now, a crazy book that involves lots of time travel and everything, and I'm like doing the final kind of edits on it before I send it off to the editors and stuff like that this week. And every time I've been like, man, this is kind of convoluted. I just think this is way less complicated than Scientology. So I'm good. Like Scientology is so crazy. Like obviously the Christian religion I could summarize in a minute or whatever. I don't think you can summarize Scientology in a minute. And there's the whole thing that they don't reveal the secrets of what's going on with the religion until you get to those higher levels. You keep learning more and more about what is actually in there. Where with like Christianity, you can read the Bible if you want to see it all there.
Right. I think that's the big. That I think is a big difference because I mean every religion asks for your money. I mean they do it a little more forcefully for sure, but everyone I mean if you're go to a Christian church on Sunday, they certainly pass around a basket and say, give us your money. They don't make you do it, but it comes up every week. Anyway, but on the second point, like I think the bait and switch aspect is different, and that is more messed up. Because I think you could explain Scientology in a minute or two, but it certainly seems even crazier, and especially because you're not used to it. You know what I mean? I mean, I think by modern day standards, if we were to really take a step back and listen to the basis of any modern religion, you would be like, well, yeah, that's pretty crazy, by what we know of the world and reality around us today. But theirs is certainly pretty darn crazy as well. And the worst part is, yeah, you're right. They suck you in with that, hey, do you want to learn, do you want to expand your horizons and be more at peace? And this is more of a social thing. And then after you're in it for 8 years and $100,000, according to like what some of the people said, and a ton of money, then they're like, oh, this is what we really believe. And I think that's just because those were the later, because it's a whole level tier system, you got to go up. Those were the later tiers written by L.R. Hubbard, and he, I think he was essentially more crazy by that point. He had started to believe his own that people, and I think him and the guy that took over both like that's another psychology that I would just love to like study or see more about. Is when these people are given these ultimate authorities over other people. And I don't mean just like, a Hitler kind of thing where you can shoot someone. I mean, they literally give themselves to these people where you're just like, they say, they don't have to put a gun to their head. They can literally like treat them like horribly, have them do all these horrific things, and then say, go out in the world and tell a reporter how awesome I am. And that's after they beat him for a year or whatever. And he goes out and says, that guy's awesome. Comes right back to get beaten some more. That's total power and control over somebody. And it obviously, like, makes them go crazy, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Such a brainwashing and stuff like that is such a crazy, crazy thing. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Anything else on the going clear before we wrap it up on this crazy,
No,
crazy world?
I think we've beaten down going clear.
All right. What do you? How many stars are you gonna give it?
I'm gonna go 4 stars on this one. I think it's, there are parts where I was like, I don't know if I like it or not, but kind of like sitting back now talking about it, it's intriguing. It really got me thinking about a lot of different aspects. And plus, it was a hard documentary to make. Like you said, someone had, they dedicated years to it, huge, really high production value to it. So great documentary, worth the 2 hours of your time. It's a little lengthy, but it's good. You?
Yeah, I give it 4 stars as well.
Cool.
Good times. All right, what do we got on the docket next time?
All right, on the docket next time, after watching the last half of Going Clear, I wanted something more positive. I wanted something more inspirational that didn't make me think so hard about how crappy people were. So I picked 3 movies that were kind of inspirational and very simple. So one is called Storm Surfers, and these are all on Netflix, by the way, and free to everyone. And it's about 2 surfers that go from anywhere from Hawaii to Tasmania, and their goal is to ride the biggest wave on the planet. They also go around with storm chasers to help find these amazing waves. So, plus, I've always wanted to surf, and I'd like to learn a little more about it. Next, we've got The Art of Flight. And this is kind of a cop-out because it's more or less part 1, or the same as the first one, except with snowboarders nice. Going over to just crazy extreme places on Earth and getting dropped off in helicopters and taking snowboarding to a new extreme. And the third one is called Maiden Trip, which documents the round-the-world voyage on a single-person sailing ship by a 14-year-old girl. I'm like, wow.
Interesting.
I figured any of these would make me feel like I should probably do more with my life, and maybe inspire me to do so.
All right. Now I'm torn. I'd say the surfing subgenre of documentaries is one of my favorite subgenres of documentaries, and I like a lot of the movies in that subgenre. And incidentally, our friend Andy has made me vow that if we ever do Endless Summer 1 or 2, we have to get him on the horn for those. But this 14-year-old girl sailing. I like sailing. I was dreamed of like living on a boat. That'd be great. And I like young people accomplishing things. So boy, I don't know. I guess let's go with the surfing one. Let's go with the storm. What was this?
All right, Storm Surfers.
Storm Surfers. All right, let's do Storm Surfers.
All right, good. I'm glad you picked that one because I think I might try and do a little surfing maybe this summer or possibly fall. I don't know if you can surf in the fall, but It's on my bucket list. Get some surfing in.
I think fall is the ideal time for surfing from what I know.
There we go. Time to start doing my homework.
All right. All right, so that will do it for us. Email us feedback at the documentary review podcast.com. Actually, it's not. Drop the. Let me try that again. It's feedback at documentaryreviewpodcast.com. Rate us on iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you next time. My name is PT, and keep it real.
I'm Jonathan. We'll see you next week.